Today we'll be taking up the topic of BSA roles and responsibilities. Under this video, we'll be covering up these topics: requirement elicitation, design mockups, user stories, acceptance criteria, lead testing activities, user acceptance test, backlog management. First, we'll go over the Agile process and how these key roles and responsibilities play within the Agile phase. So as you can see on the diagram, requirement elicitation is a pre-sprint 0 activity which will go on to sprint 1 to n. Even in the development pre and pre to post, you may be keep getting requirements, and you may have to be working on the requirement elicitation. Design and mockup phase, this is from pre-sprint 0, sprint 0 to sprint 1 to n. So before the beginning of each development sprint, you should be ready with the design and mockups. The next item is the user stories. So user stories should also be documented and ready prior to a sprint or two. So what I mean by prior to sprint or two is in sprint 0, you should be ready with the user stories for sprint 1 and 2 at least. Or minimum sprint 1 user story should be ready with all the acceptance criteria written and signed off from business. So acceptance criteria will be written sprint 0 to sprint end. During the beginning of each sprint, those should be written properly and accepted by the users and signed off. Lead test activities is sprint 0 to development sprint end and development pre to post activity. Here you should be reviewing the testing activities of your test team, reviewing all the test cases, considering that all the acceptance criteria are covered under the test scenarios so that the application is fully thoroughly tested to maintain and have a quality product, as the quality belongs to BSA. Then the last activity in terms of testing is the user's acceptance test. Here the BSA play a lead role in demoing the product to the business stakeholders who will be the end users testing the product, maintaining the issues or bugs identified during UAT testing, conducting the regular calls and interacting with the developers to fix those issues identified in your UAT, and keep tracking to see if there are no changes that have been coming in, and if there are any changes identified that need to be documented and moved for next sprint or iterations for development based on estimation and new agreement with the business. Then the last topic is the backlog management. This also, as we do the requirement elicitation, there will be new backlog items identified, and keep track of these, and before the beginning of each sprint, backlog grooming sessions should be conducted, and they should be managed based on the business priorities, future items, and how they, based on the priority, they will be moved from one sprint to another sprint, and maybe sometimes release to release. So the actual requirement elicitation, we should be beginning with quality in mind. Always consider quality when we start getting the elicitation, requirement elicitation. Understand the business problem. That will be the first thing. To understand a business problem, you should fully understand the current business issues and think of solving those issues and come up with solutions and align those with the business end user perspective. Align the business problem and need in terms of end users perspective. Roles and responsibility of business stakeholders and contacts should also need to be understood for our planning purpose. You need to know who has the authority to make key decisions, who will sign off on requirements, who will you elicit the requirements from. These are the key things we should be asking questions when we are planning for requirement elicitation. Confirm requirement scope when we are discussing at the scope level. Prepare a tracking sheet or matrix where we should be writing it down, what's in scope and what's out scope, what's tagged as a future scope, what output should be produced when we for each of these scope items, what's the expectation from the business, what input is required for to achieve these scope items. So it could be the data required, it could be any other resource inputs that is required that we need to document and before we start the actual elicitation. Learn the business. This is a very key thing as you need to learn the processes. How does business get work done? What are the current business processes? You should be fully aware of and learn these processes as a BSA. Business issues, what are the key pain points and what are the issues that a business is facing in the current technology-centric solution, what could be provided. So what business issues is your client facing that might benefit from a technology-centric solution? Systems, what systems are currently used to support the client business? What do they like about the system and what are the pain points? So if there are key systems that already their business is using it, we need to ask these questions and try to identify what are the issues with the current system, and if we have some better solutions for that, we have to plan on eliciting requirements based on these inputs provided. Being a BSA, you should be a subject matter expert, maintains a solid knowledge base of the solution functional capabilities for the product. So you should be fully aware of as-is business functionalities. Also, when we will be building up the product, you should be the subject matter expert for that solution that we'll be providing. Requirement elicitation planning. So for this planning, we need to decide on the techniques based on the end users that we have in the earlier topic. We asked the question like who will be the end users providing us the requirements. So both based on those stakeholders, we can decide on what and which type of elicitation technique we can consider. So for details, you can refer Babok for techniques. But to name some, like we can have focus group, brainstorming, interviews, etc. Conduct historical documentation review. So each organization might have documented their current processes, how manually or the existing system has workflows, how they are conducting it. So based on those, we can get the requirements from that. Then we need to get prepared by creating requirement questionnaires or list of questions that will be asking to the end users based on the understanding that we have about the business problem and the scope that we have documented and the documentation review that we did. Based on that, we need to create questionnaires. So when we will be having the actual elicitation with the business stakeholders, we can maintain this and ask those questions and get the requirements from stakeholders, business end users. Requirement elicitation. Before we actually start discussing those questions, we need to set understanding with the business stakeholders. So first need to educate them about the elicitation approach and process so they can prepare to engage and understand the project time requirement. Plan, schedule elicitation sessions at least a week in advance to block time needed from business stakeholders. Establish ground rules and agenda for session. Rank and prioritize requirements with stakeholders. Once we start getting those, you have to keep rank on them and prioritize them based on when they need that to be available for them when we go live. Assigning business values to each user stories. That will also give the value a business add to each user story. Based on that, we can plan the development activities. Confirm rationale for each requirement. Understand and define the expected behavior of the system from stakeholders' point of view. This will give us more details to write the acceptance criteria, and then we can have it signed off from the end users. Requirement traceability. Assure requirements are traceable. So at any instance, we should have the connectivity with the key scopes to all the requirements, and there are tools which we can use like TFS or even in Excel where we need to keep links between the user stories so that they are traceable, and that will help us moving forward when we are doing the UAT. And if some changes or new items come up, it will be easy to align it to the existing user stories and know that which area these changes and new items will fit in. So in today's session, I'll stop with the requirement elicitation. Moving forward, we'll be discussing design and mockups. Please provide your inputs for this session, and if you like this video, please subscribe.